Welcome, everybody, to week 6 of online education. It's hard to believe that we're a month and a half in, but so be it. Here we are. And just to kind of give you a perk, including this week, we're roughly at 3 weeks left. So hopefully, you guys are anticipating the finish line and being able to push through that, even as we think about the year drawing to a close. But as we start this new week, want to give you guys an opportunity to go back in your mind and perhaps your notes and tell me what the Berlin airlift was from last week. And then, even as we consider what that involved, what was the purpose of that? Why did it happen? And what was going to be accomplished because of the Berlin airlift? Well, even as we think about the tensions growing, we're going to see as an effort to combat the alliance that we talked about last week, which was the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. The Soviet Union said we need to figure out how we can gather nations within an alliance of our own so that if by chance we were to be attacked, not only would that grouping of those countries be able to support themselves, but we would be able to have our own alliance in place. And they called it the Warsaw Pact. These were mainly nations that were going to be in Eastern Europe. Many of them were also already under the Soviet Union, so it wasn't like they were drawing from a huge new supply, but these were countries that felt like they had similar interests that were going to now be pushed by the West, and so they decided to gather together. And as they did so, you saw two very clear-cut lines, two clear-cut groups that were going to be staring down at each other in a way similar to perhaps what had happened in World War One. We're going to see now this stalemate having been reached. Both sides saying we are going to remain in place and we're not going anywhere. The reality is they're not going to break what the other side is putting together. Two superpowers in many ways. As you look at the one side of the West with the United States and obviously the Warsaw Pact, including the Soviet Union, they're not going to go anywhere. But they said we need to now continue to arm ourselves in a way similar to what we talked about last week, the arms race. We said we need to make sure that we're going to be able to protect ourselves. And from here on out, basically, you're going to see these two sides in large part being divided. Now, obviously, there's going to be the Berlin Wall, but it's more than just a physical break. It's very much of an ideological break between these two sides that will persist, just so you guys know. Again, we will hopefully get to this point by the end of the year, but it's going to persist until the very end of the 1980s as we see this same wall being torn down with the destruction of the Berlin Wall. That was kind of the culminating moment, the end of the Soviet Union. Well, even as this arms race is beginning to grow, you're going to see this being a point of concern. A lot of countries said, you know what, we're nervous about what this might bring on for the rest of the world. The United States is no stranger, obviously, to the reality of the atomic weaponry. We've already dropped two of them on the cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and so the United States has already shown itself to be unafraid of employing a nuclear weapon. However, as you look at the rest of the world, the Soviet Union has already stepped up to the plate. So 4 years roughly after we've dropped our two, Soviet Union has now detonated its own, and we're going to see both countries now having the capability of being able to deploy a atomic weapon. However, the United States kind of feels the need to ramp it up. The Soviets have already now gained the atomic weapon, and President Truman says we've got to now be willing to take yet another step forward. And so he says we're going to develop the first thermonuclear bomb, as you see the one there in the middle being finished in 1952. These are called hydrogen bombs. And when their power is calculated, it works out to be 500 times what the one dropped in Nagasaki would work out to. To think about 500 times the ability, the destruction that was going to be wrought on Nagasaki now being carried out on another city or area of the world, it's unfathomable to think about what could have transpired had one of these been let loose. But now the United States says we have a hydrogen bomb at our disposal. There's another area that starts to grow in terms of a place of interest, and it's going to be from where the bombs would have been dropped, but that's going to be the sky. The United States and the Soviet Union have now gone after rockets. They're not just looking for localized rockets or weapons like we talked about during World War II with mortars or being able to deploy artillery pieces. You're going to see now the idea of being able to construct rockets that are going to be able to travel thousands of miles, and these are called ICBMs, intercontinental ballistic missiles. And as you look at this, you're going to see these ICBMs having the capability of not just traveling across one continent, but potentially being able to be fired from the Soviet Union and being able to attack United States soil if they could find a place that was going to be amenable or welcoming of them so that they could get close enough. Now, from Moscow is probably still too far, but they hope to be able to develop a new technology so the United States would feel threatened. They're also going to now be able to get the first satellite into space. First satellite is going to go into space, and you're going to see that now being a ability for the Soviets to communicate. This first one is called Sputnik. It's going to be launched into outer space, and now the United States is nervous and afraid of what else those Soviets might be up to. Sputnik goes up into the sky, and our new president, who's been elected in 1952, says we're going to create a new program called NASA, National Air and Space Administration. And with that, within a year, the United States has their own satellite and we're off to the races. But satellites have allowed us a number of different technologies. You guys, I think, are largely aware that stuff like GPS came even from the original satellites. Now, not a direct connection, but because of the technology that starts coming about, we have the ability to do GPS. It's pretty amazing to see the advancement of those things. Here's Sputnik. You can see it's pretty rudimentary, but this is going to be orbiting the Earth, being able to now send signals back to the Soviet Union. As Eisenhower's presidency continues on, he says that we ought to be allowed to travel over the Soviet Union and them over us. So it isn't that he's saying we will shoot down your planes, but he said we want to make sure that the Soviets aren't up to anything that might be nefarious or sketchy. However, as you think about this, the Soviets have no interest in allowing the United States to spy on them. They reject that plan out of hand and say the airspace that's above the Soviet Union is restricted. The United States cannot fly, but the United States still continues to send planes like the one on the bottom, which are called U-2 spy planes. Perhaps some of you guys have heard of a pretty famous Irish band called U2. But as you look at these spy planes, they're going to go miles into the sky and are able to photograph the Soviet Union and being able to see what's there. Now, the pilots were told if you are captured, the expectation is that you're going to kill yourself because this technology within the U-2 spy plane, plus the knowledge that the United States is spying on the Soviet Union illegally, is not going to do much for us in the international scene. However, when the Soviets shoot down a pilot by the name of Gary Powers, you're going to see now the tensions growing between the United States and the Soviet Union. It feels like the United States is constantly doing cloak and dagger stuff and trying to get under the radar. No pun intended. This would have been, I guess, over the radar. But as you look at it, we're seeing an opportunity here for us, the United States, to gain information about the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union is not about that. So you're going to see this leading to even more tension between the United States and the Soviet Union. Well, for now, we're going to go ahead and wrap up the conversation, at least for today, about the Soviets and the United States. But I do want to turn our attention to the East and be able to see what is going to break out in a small peninsula just off of the Pacific Ocean. You're going to see now the United States getting involved in the Korean conflict. We'll save that for part two. I'll see you guys then.